Good day everyone. Before anything else, I would like to introduce myself. I am Cristel Andy Castro from BSC 1-2 and the topic that I'm going to discuss is about primary and secondary deviance. However, before we get started, let me briefly state the lesson's objectives. First, learn and define what is deviance. Second, know the proponent of primary and secondary deviance. Third, differentiate the primary and secondary deviance. And lastly, know the several factors that can influence the development of primary and secondary deviance in a man. Okay, so before we know the difference between the primary and secondary deviance, let's define first what is deviance. Deviance is any behavior that violates social norms and is usually of sufficient severity to warrant disapproval from the majority of society. It means deviance is a rule-breaking behavior of people in which they fail to conform to the norms and expectations of a particular society or social group. The norm is the distinction whether a particular action is acceptable or unacceptable. Also, a person could be a criminal depends on the place where it be committed because there are different norms established in every society. After knowing the meaning of deviance, let's find out who is the proponent of primary and secondary deviance. So the one who proposed the idea of this theory is Edwin Lemerick. He was born on May 8, 1912 on Ohio, United States. He is a sociologist and has been honored with many awards and recognition. In 1951, in his book Social Pathology, Lemerick posited the notion of primary and secondary deviance. He developed the concept of primary and secondary deviance to emphasize the fact that everyone engaged in deviant acts, but only some people are caught being deviant and labeled as deviant. Edwin Lemerick developed the concept of primary and secondary deviance. So what is the difference between the two? Let's first define what is primary deviance. Primary deviance is behavior that departs from a social norm yet causes no long-term consequences for the offender. It has a very little influence on the actor and can be quickly forgotten. This lack of consequences may be because the initial deviation prompts no reaction or that reaction is not particularly negative or stigmatizing. Primary deviance does not lead to a permanent level from external observers or to a deviant self-identity because it can be quickly forgotten. The term primary means the first deviation in a person's life and is usually considered minor. It usually does not involve serious crimes. Coming from the word primary, it is the initial act of a person in which he or she violates the social norms, but it cannot create a big impact on his character as an individual, because it may consider this as a minor deviant act. It means when a person commits small violation that is not socially acceptable and considered not good, that a person committed maybe once or twice his or her life. This behavior may have a small reaction by others and it may cause a short-term effect on his personal image. So, to understand more what is primary deviance, let's have an example. A college student takes a book at the campus bookstore. He successfully steals a textbook and uses it to get an A in a course. After that, he graduated and admitted to law school, and later on became a famous judge. Because his shoplifting on that bookstore got unnoticed, it is relatively unimportant event that has little bearing on his future life. Since the shoplifting incident got unnoticed and receives no reaction from anyone, it does not affect his future. His life wasn't affected too much, that's why he fulfilled his dream even though he did something bad. Okay, another example to make it more clear. Troy wants to buy a watch that he saw on his classmate, but unfortunately, his mom said that they don't have money to buy it because it is enough only to buy their necessities. Troy felt sad because he really wants to have that watch, so he decided to steal money to her mom's wallet to buy that watch. But his mom caught him and gave him a punishment so he won't repeat it again. This action is primary deviance because he did that once and it does not affect his self-image. Her mother also gave him a punishment so he won't repeat it again. So, vandalism and cheating on exam is also an example of primary deviance. Now, after knowing what is primary deviance, let's move on to the secondary deviance. Secondary deviance occurs when a deviant event comes to the attention of significant others or social control agents who apply negative label. It is often more severe than primary deviance, and most importantly, it is characteristic of an entrenched self and social identity as deviant. So, if the initial act of a person continuously or repeatedly violates the social norms, it may cause different reaction about the personal character of an individual. This may lead to give his or her a negative label based on how others view them. Example, if someone labeled them as addict, rapist, and murderer, labeling theory plays a big role in secondary deviance because this will be the driving force to a person to repeat his deviant action. So, what is labeling theory? Labeling theory is when a person committed a deviant act or offenses in which people react on that behavior and they will start to label a person. That's why people continue or repeatedly doing their deviant action. That's the reason why we have secondary deviance. To understand more the secondary deviance, let's have an example. The shoplifting student is caught by a security guard and expelled from the college. With his law school dream dashed and his future becomes cloudy. His options are limited, and people who know him will say he lacks character, and he begins to share their opinion. He eventually becomes a drug dealer and winds up in prison. So the shoplifting student's life was greatly impacted by the fact that he was caught by the security guard, and because of what he did, other people are categorizing him as lacking in character. And because he is aware of what other people think of him, he decides to engage in selling drugs, which leads to his imprisonment. Another example, a child plays a prank in class and is mildly punished by his teacher. Lately, he accidentally causes another disturbance and is again reprimanded. However, because of these repeated disturbances, the teacher begins using terms such as bad boy and mischief maker towards the child. So the child then became resentful of the labels and may act out, fulfilling the role that he sees as expected of him, especially if he discovers that there is a certain status among a certain group of peers in playing that role. Here are some factors that can influence the development of primary and secondary deviance to a person. For primary deviance, we have peer pressure. It is the pressure one's friends may exert to get them involved in activity or endeavor. An individual peers will lead them into committing deviant acts even though that person may still have control over his actions. Even if the individual does not want to commit the act, they will be pressured. And also, family is one of the factors because it can create a world of primary deviance for their children. A child may run away from home and do something negative to get their parents' attention. The child can also run away in relation as this is the only way they believe they can get through them. Next, for secondary deviance, the first one is the media, that usually portray the glamorous lifestyle of a criminal, which can lead to emulation. A person may be influenced by seeing the flashy, luxurious, and exciting lifestyle that criminals have. This pressure can lead to emulation and wanting to experience this lifestyle for themselves. Next is peers. A person may see their peers engaging in criminal activities and want to be like them. To fit in, a person will feel as if they must engage in secondary deviance. The third one is social. An individual may want to be involved in secondary deviance as it can bring them respect from their friends or even strangers. Some deviant acts are associated with particular social status. And the last one is economic. Some individuals may look for financial gains when committing secondary deviance. Lastly, before we end this, let's have a conclusion. So, for the conclusion, primary deviance is the behavior that departs from a social norm yet causes no long-term consequences for the offender, while secondary deviance is often more severe than primary deviance, and most importantly, it is characteristic of an entrenched self and social identity as deviant. That's all. Thank you.